Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Nathan is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. It's up 24/7. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Vince. How you doing this morning, buddy?
I'm frosted. I'm livid. I'm angry. I'm miffed. And I'll tell you why, since you asked. And by the way, class, everything that you are about to hear is my opinion, and I'm allowed to have it. Because if I didn't say that, I would be sued. But here we go. So I sent my petition to the CEO, a guy named Marc Roecker, R-O-E-C-K-E-R, of Laclede Electric Cooperative. It's a corporation here in Missouri. And I'm for my candidacy to run for the board of directors to reduce my electric bill and everyone else's who's attached, and to stop the onslaught and the poisoning, the toxic environment of smart meters and these radio frequency transmitters. And I want to reduce the cost for everybody. Okay, that's what I want to do. Well, I have the bylaws in front of me, and I got them from Marc Roecker himself. He handed them to me, so I didn't, go and research the wrong version. This is the right version. I'm just going to read you one sentence. Any 15 or more members, that means members of the electric cooperative, that means people who pay the electric bills, any 15 or more members acting together may make other nominations by petition not less than 45 days prior to the meeting, and the secretary shall post such nominations at the same place where the list of nominations made by the committee is posted. So you have to have it in 45 days prior to the annual meeting. Okay. So I get my 16 in. They say that, well, it looks like 15 of them are good. One, we can't find the address of. So I sent an email to Marc Roecker saying, I am a candidate. He tells me in an email that I get no response that's meaningful that says I'm a candidate. So I say they referred it to their attorney for review and research and the board of directors. So what they're doing is, in my opinion, they're stalling. And while the board of directors meeting is once a month, and if you miss the meeting by 15 days, you have to wait to the next meeting. That's 45 days. Then they meet, and then maybe we ought to turn it over to our attorney. And it takes him a month, and then it takes a month. And by the time you're done, half a year is gone, okay? Half a year of my campaigning to get the membership to understand that these guys can lower our electric rates and our electric bills. So I have an email from their attorney. His name is Shawn Battagler, Battagler. And I'm sure he'll be listening to this. Here's what it says. It came in yesterday. Mr. Finelli, I have a message here that you called. Well, he has that because I called his office, asking him to call me back. I presume you are calling in regard to your inquiry seeking confirmation of the adequacy of your petition for next year's election for the board of directors of Laclede Electric Cooperative. I have been asked to provide a legal opinion on the matter. Once I've had the opportunity to review the petition and the bylaws, I will contact you to schedule a time to discuss any concerns. I assure you I will give the board my opinion, and it will be communicated to you with sufficient time to remedy any deficiencies if they are found. Thank you in advance for your patience. Sincerely, Shawn Battagler. He's an attorney in Springfield. His phone number, if you're interested in calling him, is 417-864-6401. Now, what he's saying, once I've had the opportunity to review the petition and the bylaws, I will contact you to schedule a time to discuss your concerns. Once he's had an opportunity. Is that like today, tomorrow, 6 months from now? What is it? No one knows. And then he will schedule a time. When will he schedule it? No one knows. Is that a week? Is it tomorrow? Is it next month? We don't know. I assure you, I will give the board my opinion. Now, that's just his opinion. Does that hold any water? I don't know. And it will be communicated to you with sufficient time to remedy any deficiencies if they're found. Well, I'm trying to run for the board right now. My campaign has started, but he won't let me have access to the information I need that's controlled by Laclede Electric Cooperative, like who the members are. I have to be a candidate to do that. So what these guys are doing, in my opinion, is moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts. Here's what I said to him. I responded the same day. Mr. Battagler and Mr. Roecker, that's the attorney and the CEO. I'm sure you know the term bad faith. That's a legal term. Section 5, nominations of the bylaws, is 2 paragraphs in length. It takes the average reader about 2 minutes to read and is self-evident. Are you, Mr. Roecker, are you, Mr. Roecker, and the board of directors conspiring to move the goalposts? I expect immediate confirmation of my petition and a written, detailed explanation of the costs of this maneuver. Thank you, Vincent Finelli, candidate, Laclede Electric Cooperative Board of Directors. Now, what I'm saying is, this is a maneuver. Now, what's a maneuver? According to the dictionary, a maneuver is a moving, guiding, steering, navigating, directing, manipulating. That's what a maneuver is. Okay? It's also a large-scale military exercise of troops, warships, and other forces, which I think this is also. This is a large scale within the corporation, including, the directors and the CEO and the attorney, and military type exercise to prevent me from becoming a candidate or delaying my candidacy approval by the board. I believe that's what this is.
Mm-hmm. They're buying time. Yeah.
They're buying time because they know what I want to do. They know I want the list of all the members, all 35,000 of them, so I can communicate with them and let them know about what this organization is doing, the Electric Cooperative. Now, the reason that I'm telling you this is this attorney, Battagler, Shawn Battagler, is a partner in a law firm called Aderick Evans, Lewis Figg, and Battagler, LLC. Now, what do they do? Who are their clients? Let me tell you who they represent. Now, this is just a little microcosm of what's wrong with America. Okay? So I want to be on the board. I've met all the obligations. I've read to you what the requirements are. You only need 15 signatures from 15 members. That's it, period. Well, you have to be a ratepayer. You've got to pay for electricity from these guys. All right. Well, their clients, according to their website, which is Law Office Mo, L-A-W Office MO.com. Their clients are Associated Electric Cooperative, Incorporated, Association of Missouri Electric Cooperatives, Atchison Holt Electric Cooperative, Barton County Electric Cooperative, Caldwell County Mutual Insurance Company, Cargill, Casey's General Stores, the City of Bethany, City of Mercer, City of Princeton, City of Trenton, City of Unionville, Crawford Electric Cooperative, Inc. The list goes on and on and on with schools. There's a nursing home in there, Hy-Vee food stores, Laclede Electric Cooperative, more water districts, public water supply district, Andrew County, DeKalb County, Lafayette County, SEMO Electric Cooperative, United Services, United Energy Services, Webster Electric Cooperative. What I'm saying is these guys are the hired guns, I'm speaking metaphorically, of electric cooperatives, water-type organizations, municipal water organizations, corporations, and an insurance company. They are the people that when, let's say you get hurt by an electric line, I believe these are the guys that you're going to face in court when you say, my arm was severed by this wire that was dangling and it just came right down, came right off the power pole, electrocuted me, darn near killed me, and you could assume, and these guys are the ones, I believe, who will make sure that you get the least payout possible, the least compensation possible. That's who I believe I'm dealing with. I'm looking forward to having them on the air with me. Shawn Battagler, attorney, would you like to come on the air with me? You're invited. Let me give you the number. You can call in right now, Shawn. Here it goes. 866-582-9933. Let's have it out on the air. Let's do it. Publicly. Live. No safety net. I'm ready. Are you? That's what's wrong with America. The people that you pay, your electric cooperative, and how are you going to do without electricity? It's pretty tough. So you pay the electric rate, and they say, well, we need more money because we get sued. And they bury in to the annual report how much money they're spending on legal fees to fight their customers. And you pay for them to fight you, like I'm paying them to fight me. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Class, I use the words bad faith, and I just want to tell you what it means. It means double-mindedness, double-heartedness, and duplicity, fraud, deception. Okay? It also, according to the internet, an intentional dishonest act. An intentional dishonest act by not fulfilling legal or contractual obligations, misleading another, violating basic standards of honesty in dealing with others. That's what bad faith means. And that was my question. Is the CEO, Marc Roecker of Laclede Electric Corporation, acting in bad faith? Is Shawn Battagler acting in bad faith? Is the entire board of directors of Laclede Electric Cooperative, are they acting in bad faith? That's what I want to know. I have my opinions. And what does self-evident mean? It means it doesn't need to be explained. It's obvious. And I'm saying that the bylaws that say you have to have your petition in 45 days before the annual meeting is self-evident. How much interpretation does that need? Well, this guy, Shawn, told me, Shawn Battagler, that they charge $250 an hour. Now, I'm sure they're billing for all the time that it takes him to read his email from me, and that's a really long email. Must be almost 100 words. They're going to bill for that. They're going to bill for his time to communicate with what his opinions are, his research, on and on and on. I'll bet you this thing easily hits $1,000. Easily. Until I ask him another question. It'll be another $1,000. I've got a lot of questions. And this is going to go on for as long as they want it to go on, until somebody says uncle, and it's not going to be me. Rich, I just wanted to share that with you. I'm livid because this is just one small speck of what's happening here in the United States of America. We are being taken down. We, the bottom 93%, are being taken down by the oligarchical elite at the top.
Yep. Yeah, I would call them paper pusher mercenaries, and it's basically fascism from the corporate oligarchs down to the small local co-ops that has no competition. In fact, I have an article here in front of me. The myth of American capitalism exposed, competition is dying as the biggest corporations gobble up everything, was authored by Michael Snyder, which is the end of the American Dream blog. He's really a good writer, and I check out his stuff every day. Anyway, long story short, he talks about everything from the airline industry to banks. Basically, pretty much all industries now have turned into a corporate oligarchy, and there's no competition left. And he quoted what we've quoted many times by John Rockefeller, where he infamously said that competition is sin. And see, as long as we the people allow this, we are going to have increased fascism, which has been increasing heavily over the last 20 years. Basically, when you don't have competition, it means that you don't have choices. When you don't have choices, it means you cannot control your own destiny. And when you look at all these companies, the too big to fail, the too big to jails, that use our money, and then governments create austerity and fix their mistakes and pay them off. And the little person, or the bottom 93% of income earners, basically pay for all these mistakes and all this corruption and all this manipulation and rigging of the game through inflation and things like that. That's why I talk about Keynesian economics. But a lot of these, when you look at the money printing through QE and the subsidies and the special interests and the lobbyists and the PACs, the little guy can no longer compete. And this is why, for those of you living in that Missouri area, how often do you hear people trying to basically help the little guy like Vincent Finelli's doing? How many people do that? How many people stick their neck out today? Because what these people are doing, from the attorneys to all the executives in this co-op, is that they're feathering their own nest. And I hear the music, Vince. I'm going to talk a couple more minutes about that.
Sure.
And I want to redefine Keynesian economics because it's very apropos to the corruption that's going on. It basically covers it up.
We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us. Keynesian economics. Please continue, Rich.
Yeah, basically what I wanted to do is show the listeners how we are heading towards an obvious recession. And we've been talking about how the books have been cooked and have been rigged for so many years. And basically the last 10 years of so-called growth and economic expansion was because of quantitative easing, where 95% of the money goes to the top 1% to 7%. Basically, the top 1% to 2% gets the great majority of it. And then, of course, corporate stock buybacks, which we've talked about in great detail. But think about Keynesian economics and how vague it is, and how little control the people have over it. Because when you really look at history, Keynesian economics usually leads governments to demand austerity, because they're not about free markets and supply and demand. And that's exactly what a co-op is. You look at how the Keynesian people believe that they can create an economy by changing money supply. Or, basically how I define it is, when in doubt, inflate. Central bank, top-down, no accountability, elite control, corruption, and manipulation has been created to keep the status quo. And it's the same thing, same analogy as the co-op. So if deficits don't matter and there's no competition, they can hire attorneys left and right, and they don't really care about the bottom line. because that bottom line will be enveloped by the taxpayers, by the customers. So we have to really look at this so-called elite interventionism, which is how some people define Keynesian economics: print, inflate, buy now, pay later, and even allowing the shift of asset and liability columns, which most people call creative accounting manipulation. So we have to take these vague definitions and really see how the little people have no control over what's going on. Now, you look at this recession that we're coming into, and for those of you who are in Missouri, trust me, you are going to want Vincent Finelli to be on the board, to teach you about off-grid living, to give you options, to unveil some of the corruption and manipulation going on behind the scenes, because this recession is going to be bad. Okay? Nobody knows, has a lot of specifics, but we've talked about this in great detail. You know, when you look at, now we have the death cross where the 50-day moving average goes below the 200-day moving average. I've talked about yield curve inversions so many times in lots of detail. And you got to look at the flattening of the yield curve, the LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate. You know, it's gone up over 2% just since like 2015, maybe 2014. Basically, this short-term overnight rate. Well, what's the Fed going to do in this situation? They got to be usually between 4 and 5% on the short-term rate, so they can reduce the rates when they admit we're in a recession, when the numbers get revised, because everything is in arrears when they announce a recession. So right now, we're less than 3%. So if they admit a recession, which we are definitely in a bear market right now, how are they going to keep rates from going negative? And they probably won't. So you got to look at the fact that we have almost $400 trillion of loans and derivatives. That includes credit cards and auto loans and personal loans and everything else. So the reference rate, the benchmark, is at a point where the Fed really is stuck in a corner. If they move to the right, it's like, they could literally crash everything, because when rates go down, or if rates go up, everything collapses. Stocks, bonds, housing, real estate, especially commercial and retail. Look what's happened to emerging markets when they raised interest rates. I mean, that's hanging by a thread. Look at all of our zombie banks, zombie companies out there. 20% of the companies in the Russell 2000, basically 10% of the S&P 500. I'm being gracious with those numbers. I read it's up to 14 or 15%. Basically have to borrow to pay interest. These are zombie companies. Pardon me. So how are the people going to get their money back when they bought a bond from these companies? Most likely they won't. So for those of you who are stuck in the corporate oligarchy world, who have no competition, no options, guess what's going to happen? They're going to tax the bejesus out of you with electricity or with other fuel sources or with anything that you're stuck in the system and can't do anything about. Trust me, you are going to want to have options. We have basically a country now that rule of law no longer matters. Rule of law has gone to the highest bidder. And we really have to be careful how we look at who the customer is and who the product is. It's just like big tech, the Googles, Facebook, Twitters, the FANGs. Basically, we are the product, the little people. And the advertisers are the customers. So we're paying them for personal self-incrimination. You've heard me call it the self-incrimination station and the social indoctrination station. So this is why you can see customer service and accountability decreasing to the point where it almost doesn't exist anymore. And this is why we're going to need as many options as possible, and it's kind of an analogous to the Fed. When the recession is admitted, how low can they print? Because it's pretty obvious that to most people who do a little bit of reading that the only reason the interest rates are going up is not because we have this great economy. You've heard me mention many, many times that Trump inherited sabotage. He inherited demolition. He inherited a disaster. It's a lot less left-right paradigm than it is basically the elite managing and controlling the serfs. And that's what we have. So when you look at the headwinds, which are so unsustainable for future rates of growth, and all the debt that we have, especially corporate debt alone could take down this whole thing. So we're going to want options, and we're going to want people in the driver's seat that gives the little guy some ability to control their own destiny, to not get into so much debt, to have ideas and solutions. And that's what we talk about in USA Prepares all the time, Vince. We talk about ideas and solutions. And if people can see what's coming, especially with automation and AI, robotics, and the technocracy that's coming, people are going to need a little bit of leeway, a little bit of hedge room, because the speculation is all the little guy has. We're going eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So the more self-sufficient we could be, the more we can reduce our prices, the better off we're going to be. Now, I'm not saying living off-grid is the best for everybody, because nothing is a fix-all for everybody. But the more self-sufficient you can be, the more you practice frugality, is going to give you more options for the future, because taxation is going to go through the roof because the powers that be don't want to take out of their own pocket. They want to, look at the wall, okay? $25 billion, and how many hundreds of billions do we spend to pay for the crime and the damage and the violence and the drug use and the lives lost and abused, when just a few billionaires could pay for this frickin' wall? Same thing with self-sufficiency preparedness schools that I talk about all the time. We can have a hero billionaire step up to the plate, write a check out of his own pocket, but they don't want to do that. They want you to pay for it. They want the little guy to pay for it. They want you to be in debt. And this is basically a fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans. Now, long story short, we could talk about this in great detail, but the Dems want to divide us. They want to put the attention to themselves, and the rule of law has gone to the highest bidder, and they have an addiction to power, money, and control. The little guy in the Republican Party wants to talk about ideas and solutions for the people, we the people, of the people, by the people. We want to talk about freedom and liberty for the little guy. We want the rule of law, and most people want to be left alone. But see, the powers that be do not want that. They have to, and another great example is, I was watching Judge Janine the other day. She had a guest on, one was a Republican, one was a Democrat. Long story short, the interruptions, talking over somebody, taking messages out of context by the Democrat is what they did. I'll be honest with you, I don't even think there should be debates anymore. I think people should do their own reading and research and go to the venue that they think is going to be the best for the American people. Not for the elite, but for the little guy. Vince? Well, I don't know if Vince is there. I don't even know if I'm on the air right now, folks, but I'm going to continue to talk. I don't know if I was disconnected, which is very possible. But if I want to hear the music in a few minutes, I probably will call back. But speaking of rule of law, I think what we need to do is, for the people, we need to declassify a lot of things to answer a lot of questions. And that is, we need to declassify all the Uranium One and Clinton Foundation information. We have to declassify the FISA warrant fiasco and all the documents. We have to declassify the geoengineering and weather modification tools and all documents related to Barack Obama and billionaires, cash given to whomever. We need to declassify all the documents about 911, and we need to declassify all the information relating to alternative energies. This is what the little people is demanding. This is what we need. At Montana.com. Vince is away from the phone for a moment, so I'm going to continue to discuss before the hard break in a few minutes here. Now, when I was talking about economy recently, everything I talk about is for the benefit of the little guy, because the little guy has no protection under the law, no rights under the law, no restitution under the law, unfortunately. And we're doing everything we can to try to get recognized and to change that. But there's four big, and I try to mention this as often as I can when I talk about our present reading of the economy. You know, inversion of yield curves, recessions, this stuff is not new, okay? For the last 200 years, it would happen about every 4.5 years, the last, 15, 20 years because of the reading of the game and things like quantitative easing and stock buybacks and all of these artificial manipulations and creative accountings, which has only assisted the elite. They've been able to make the recessions happen a little further apart. But besides Keynesian economics, there's central bank corrupt monetary policy, there's demographics. For example, the number one group for growth in America over the next, basically until 2050, possibly beyond, is the old people. Well, the old people are broke, the old people are retiring, the old people consume less, they eat less, and obviously that's not going to be, and with the advent of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and the technocracy that is coming, the math does not look good for future rates of growth, especially when you add in global corporate household debt and government promises. So we have to consider the demographics, central banks, Keynesian economics, and I think the biggest reason out of all four of those, and they're all pretty equal, with the biggest reason for our economy going downhill is political correctness, and that is group identity politics. And I talk about this, for those of you who are regular listeners, I talk about this in great detail, and that is how when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for certain groups, not only do you insult those groups and degrade those groups and disrespect those groups, but you do everything opposite of empowering those groups. You don't empower a group or an individual or a nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job. Basically, you destroy America from within because you're rewarding mediocrity, and you turn the whole country into a law of diminishing returns. So certain things that were benefits, to especially young adults post-World War II, like opportunity, knowledge, ingenuity, productivity, innovation, these things have degraded to the point where it's almost impossible in a corrupt, manipulative, nepotism type society to get ahead. And this is why we discuss everything under the umbrella and not blame it on one thing. Too many economists blame it on just the central bank corrupt monetary policies, but there's a lot more to it. Vince, I hear you're back?
Yeah. Well, we had a little bit of technical difficulty, and it's interesting. I was speaking, and you couldn't hear me, but now you can. So Nathan jumped right on it, and he fixed it. And you mentioned something that piqued my attention, and that is we are all card-carrying members of the bottom 93%. But we can join another group, and that would be the bottom 13%, if you do what I plan to do this Christmas. Now, Christmas, to me, is a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. That's what Christmas is. But the day, December 25th, was just picked. It doesn't mean that was the day that Jesus Christ was born. But that's the day that we observe his birth. Well, I have a problem with being forced by the marketeers to buy things that we don't need, and I'm not going to do it. So you can join it. The bottom 13% of Americans who are going to boycott Christmas Spending 2 class, you can withhold your hard-earned money from the corporate oligarchy. You can do that. Only buy things that you need. And whether it happens to be on December 27th or February 5th, it doesn't matter. If you need it and you can afford it, that's when you buy it. Not because of a made-up day to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben is with us in Montana, live in Montana, offgridmontana.com. George in New Hampshire, USA Prepares instructor, is joining us. Welcome, George.
Hi, Vincent. Hi, Rich.
Hey.
Hi, George.
Hey. I just wanted to chime in on one thing you said, Rich, earlier was about building the wall and how easy it would be if they wanted to. My son got out of the military maybe coming up on 2 years ago. Well, it was just around coincided with Trump coming in as president, and he wanted to go gangbusters where he wanted to hire like 5,000 more border guards and build a wall, everything like that. So I told my son, I said, look, that's the only federal job open right now. Why don't you put in for it? I said, throw in as many irons in the fires as you can because you don't know which one's going to come out. So anyway, they put him through a lengthy process where they bounced him around up near the Canadian border. He had to go for some briefing. He had to go here. He had to go there, all on his own nickel. Well, finally they said, okay, they had instituted a lie detector test. So he had to go all the way from New Hampshire to New Jersey. So he took time off from work. He drove down. He got a hotel room for the night, and the next morning he went in. Well, after the test, he got a call. He says, you passed. All right, fine. Then he gets another call saying, well, it was inconclusive. So, all right, the process begins again. He goes back down to New Jersey again, all on his own, nickel, time off from work, all this. Long story short, what ended up happening was they came back and they said, well, you didn't pass, but we're willing to work with you. You can come back on another occasion. So my son looked at them and said, look, I took time off from work twice now. I drove all the way down here. I paid for my room, and I simply don't have the time, the money, and so on to keep pursuing this. So we dropped it. But you see now, they can't find enough, and my son's a pretty stellar kid. I'm not just saying that. He volunteer fire department, straight-laced, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. Once in a while he might have a little bit of a beer or something like that. But he's basically a hard-working, good kid. And what I'm saying is that they don't want people on that border. And you got those people in there, and I know if any one of us, and I grant you the three of us combined probably couldn't hold down a job, right? As you say. But I won't go on and on. I'll just say I mean it, not because we're not capable, but that reminds me of just one other phrase I'm going to say, and I'll shut up, is that, what applies to, I'd say, the faculty on this staff, and I'd say Dr. Shealy, Vincent, Rich, Doc Miller, Guineith, the whole crew, is that I'm going to apply this saying. It was Machiavelli who said it one time. He said, good men or women can always get gold, but gold cannot always get good men or good women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, George, what's happened in America is, and you've heard me say this, I know you're a regular listener, hard work, effort, poor results, qualifications, job performance no longer matters. And this is why we hear so much political correctness in politics, because the most vocal are the criminals. They're basically the people who have done the crimes, and they're trying to mask their crimes and create more distractions and diversions. And, it's so important for the American people to stand for principle right now. And, when people stick up for the little guy or stick up for America, the useful idiots, as the elite calls them, the first words out of their mouth is, well, that's offensive, because it's basically a term for excuse behavior in the English language, where the end result is to make the people more submissive and break our will. And we don't have a justice system anymore. I know some people say it's two-tiered, one for Democrats, one for Republicans, or one for the aristocracy and one for the serfs, but really it's multi-tiered, because when you look at the bottom 93%, it's tiered based on what your skin pigmentation is, your gender, your sex, sexual orientation, religion. It's so basically all the criteria that built America by having high standards and expectations for getting a job has basically been destroyed through group identity politics, which is their home run pitch, and the other three criteria that I mentioned about the economy earlier. Now, George and Vince, I got to ask you, you said there was technical difficulties. I didn't know if I was still on the air by myself, Vince, when you were gone. Did you guys hear when I was talking about the declassification that the people are, what I'm reading, what they're demanding? Did you hear that?
I could hear you on the phone, but as soon as it connected and I could hear you on the phone live, I shut off the computer stream. So all I can say, I could hear you on the phone. I couldn't hear Vincent on the phone before the news break and that glitch. So that's the best I can answer it on my end.
Okay. Vince, did you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you, and I brought us back from the break, but you didn't hear me. So I picked up the telephone in the studio, and I called Studio 3 at GCN, and I spoke with Nathan, our engineer, and I explained it, and he could not hear me either. Now, the interesting thing about that was I was speaking, the segment where I disappeared, I was speaking, I brought us back from the break, you heard me, everything was fine, then you spoke, and I sat back at the microphone, didn't say anything, and then I disappeared from you being able to hear me. So
that's correct.
Nathan,
and this has happened before, folks, and I don't think this is pardon me, a mistake. I think
hang on. I asked Nathan what it is, and Nathan's not sure, but he fixed it. He was able to fix it by doing a few things. And I'm not in Minnesota, so I don't know exactly what he did, but he was able to fix it. So fortunately, Rich Scheben, you were on, and you just took over. And I can tell you that if it were Captain John Regan, he would do the same thing. Norm Shealy would do the same thing. Rick Miller would do the same thing. That's what our instructors do. They just rise to the occasion. And George in New Hampshire is right. He's a USA Prepares instructor. You're absolutely right. The three of us, if we pooled our resources, we still wouldn't be able to hold down a job because we ask too many questions. No question about it, we ask too many questions. I've been fired by my doctor because I asked too many questions. They told me, they said, look, you asked too many questions. What they didn't say was, that we don't know the answers to. That's the problem. They get embarrassed. And I'm not like a student who's trying to embarrass the teacher in front of the class. It's just me and Mrs. Finelli, and I want to know the answers. And I think that if someone is practicing medicine, they ought to know more about it than I do. Otherwise, why am I here?
I don't know if it's because we ask too many questions. I think it's because we would get fired because we stick up for the little people and the rule of law, and we stand for principle. I think that has same rules of law as accountability for everybody, truth, and if they do it, we should do it. It shouldn't be classified by what group you're in. But can I go over, if you don't mind, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if the public heard this, the declassification for the people. Because the rule of law has obviously gone to the highest bidder. And would you mind if I take 30 seconds and go over this, Vince?
Take as much time as you'd like.
Okay. I don't know when we had all that tech issue, I don't know if it got to the people. But But this is what I'm reading that the people are demanding right now. They're demanding that Uranium-1 and the Clinton Foundation, all that information needs to be declassified. The FISA warrant fiasco and all the documents need to be declassified. Geoengineering and weather modification tools need to be declassified. All documents related to Barack Obama and the billions of dollars of cash given to Iran and other countries needs to be declassified. Documents related to 911 needs to be declassified. And all documents related to the alternative energies that are hidden from the people needs to be declassified. I think if, and I know the White House and the Pentagon listens to this program on occasion, and what we need to do is bring back common sense and logic. I mean, when the number one story on the mainstream media is how offensive the song Baby It's Cold Outside is, when we have thousands of rap lyrics over the last couple decades talking about murder, rap, drug use, shootings, violence, we have to bring back common sense and logic, because the justice system is bought and paid for. And when I say bought and paid for, it means that they've sold out the little guy. That's what that means. So if we can bring back some ideas and solutions for the little people, and, I mean, look what's happening in France, for Pete's sakes. Macron, literally, he's using foreign troops against his own people. I mean, we really are living in a total Twilight Zone episode. So this is why we're hearing so much vocalization from the left, from the criminals. And I don't know if this was heard either, but the people who do the most talking and point the most fingers are masking the diversions and distractions, because that's what they've done or they are doing. So when someone calls you controversial, extremist, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, conspiracy theory, and you did this crime, you did that crime, basically they did it. That's what that means. And this is why it's so important to stand for principle, because the little guy is running out of options. And we are heading towards a very, very bad recession. Words like default, junk bonds, margin debt, bankruptcy, we're going to be hearing these words on a very regular basis, gentlemen.
Rich Sheben's with us. George in New Hampshire's with us. And, Rich, you mentioned something about funds. Well, there's an article in U.S. News, TheGuardian.com, talking about world news. And here's the headline: how the U.S., meaning United States, sent $12 billion in cash to Iraq and watched it vanish. Additional headline is special flights brought in tons of banknotes which disappeared into the war zone. Well, in the year after the invasion of Iraq by the United States, in 2003, nearly 281 million notes, weighing 363 tons, were sent from New York to Baghdad for disbursement to Iraqi ministers and U.S. contractors using C-130 planes. The deliveries took place once or twice a month. And they lost 363 tons of cash into the war zone. They have no idea where it went. That's the United States government. And our government doesn't seem to care where it went, because it was for the Iraqis. It's like, okay, here's some cash, you guys rebuild. Rebuild what we just blew up. And so billions of Federal Reserve accounting unit dollars disappeared without a trace. And the government says, well, yeah, it's their money. What difference does it make where it went? It's theirs. So we gave it to them. And then they say it's not taxpayer money. Well, how is it possible that Federal Reserve accounting unit dollars cannot be taxpayer money? Even if they print them out of thin air, there's a hidden tax called inflation. And if you want to see what it looks like, just go to the store. That's what inflation looks like. The dollar's worth less. Why? Because they're printing them like they're free, and they're flying them. They flew them to Iraq in C-130s. Tons of them. Not just 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 tons. We're talking about hundreds of tons, 363 tons of $100 bills. That, by the way, that's the largest denomination that we print, $100 bills. We used to print much larger denominations, like 500, 1,000, 10,000. We don't do that anymore. Any comments, George?
Well, I'll just say that you know and I know if we're off by the slightest penny on our federal income tax, you know what they could do to us, and you've seen it on the news. Some elderly couple goes to jail for some technicality, and like Rich would say, too big to jail. The other ones would get away with blanket things, but I worked for the Department of Defense back in the early 80s when Regan came in and he started really putting a lot of money into defense. And I was an accounting technician at the Army Materials Research Center. It was over at the old Watertown Arsenal. And part of my job was they had the Fort Devens, which is no longer there. They commissioned it. But the thing is, I can remember it would be my job to go through the accounts, go through each department head would have a note, and there would be so many unofficial calls where somebody was charging calls to, say, the base main number, and the telephone company would charge it off to that account, and it might be somebody who got out of the military calling his girlfriend who's still back on the base. And in the end, I remember I had gotten the entire account down to within maybe, say, $3.40. And I had to go to a meeting halfway across the state with my supervisor to sit down with the other supervisor with his accounting technician, and we had to chase that $3.40 around for the afternoon. Finally, I looked at them and I said, look it. I said, it's $3.40. What they're paying you, me, transportation cost, and everything else, why don't we just write it off? Why don't we just say, look, I got to the point, I even got to the point I was going to take the $3.40 out of my pocket, put it on the table, and say, here it is, right? But this is our federal government at work, because, like you say, pallets and pallets of that money over there. And I remember an interview, the guy was saying, who was one of the people there, he says the mullahs, the rest of them would line up, they went to hospital, they went to school, and they were told each week, spend it as fast as you can, and yet we don't have money for infrastructure.
Zero Hedge just popped up a little survey on my screen, and it said something like this. Did you take time to mourn George Herbert Walker Bush's death? Yes or no? 88% said no. I don't have any problem with that. He was the read my lips, no new taxes. You know, the guy who then raised taxes, that guy. He was the guy who unleashed fire on small countries. Blew them up. Blew up their infrastructure. Just, to make sure that everybody's okay and safe. That guy. Did you mourn him? No, I didn't. Any comments, gentlemen? Rich?
Well, you mean about Bush?
Yeah. Did you mourn him?
Well, not really. I think, and we've talked about this last week. He was a globalist, and he even admitted the New World Order. And I'm not saying he didn't do some good things. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve some respect, but nobody is doing anything for the little people right now. It's kind of, pardon my diversion here from your question, and I'm not really doing that. It's just that I'm looking at how much time we have left. There's an article here that basically says Germany launches how to identify Nazi parents guide for schools. If your girls have braided hair and your boys are athletic, and young people want to move to the country so they can be self-sufficient and have a farm. So basically, what I see a lot of the elite doing anymore today is their job is to eliminate options, eliminate thinking, cultivate and groom people, so they are going to stay in a caste system and not be able to control their own destiny. Like we were talking about Obama giving, billions of cash to Iran. Well, Obama also stole $300 billion from Fannie and Freddie to keep Obamacare afloat. Basically stole from poor families and private investors who invested in Fannie and Freddie. So basically the bond buyers got screwed. And this is what's happening all across the nation. It's an aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. So when I see QE and stock buybacks, not for the benefit of the people and the bottom line, and only for the benefit of the elite and the hierarchy and the organizations, I'm not going to, give them a great send-off. And that's what we need. We need people who start thinking for the little guy. And that's what we do here on USAPrepares.com. We talk about the little guy. Here's a quote. I've read this before by Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged. When you see that trading is done by compulsion, not by consent, when you see that money or dollars is flowing to those who deal, not in goods but in favors, when you see men getting richer by graft and by pull, basically deceit and fraud, by using one's position, especially in the public office, which we see every day, so they can obtain personal profits and advantages for themselves. And your laws don't protect you against them, but protect them against you. That's when you see corruption being rewarded and honesty being a self-sacrifice. And that's when you know how your society is doomed. And I go back to that every few weeks and mention that because we don't have anybody representing or sticking up for the little guy. And that's exactly what we need. So whether it be George Bush, whether it be the definition of Keynesian economics, whether it be central banks, group identity politics, everything is meant to destroy, destruct, obstruct, distract, divide. Every strategy is almost a divide and conquer strategy to manage and control the serfs, the little people. And we're getting to the point where with government regulations and laws that don't even exist because the rule of law is now bought and paid for, that the little guy just can't control their own destiny. And this example, this article that I just read from Germany, is just a really good example. We're getting to the point where almost every strategy and every policy is meant to keep the little guy down. And here's an article right here. Al Sharpton's daughter sprained her ankle and sued New York City for $95,000. Arnold Schwarzenegger says he would eliminate evil fossil fuels, but yet he just bought a brand new $265,000 Bentley Continental. Bernie Sanders says that we need to tax everybody for climate change and carbon footprints and all this, and yet he just spends $300,000 on a private jet in 1 month. Democrat, Hirono from Hawaii says that they're much smarter than the rest of the people, meaning Democrats. We're getting everything. Everything is propaganda, lies, false flags. And here's another article, another hate crime hoax. Student admits that she sent self-racist notes to other people and around the university. And nothing's real. And this is why we got to stand for principle. The same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Truth, and if someone has less consequence of their behavior because of what group they're in, then we do it too. That should be the base for America going forward. But everybody, too many people, especially in the corporate oligarchy world and big government world, is bought and paid for. And the little guy just cannot control their own destiny. And so I don't care who it is in the hierarchy of things. If people aren't trying to give the power to the people, we the people. And to me, they're not going to deserve a good grade from me.
Well, you mentioned this Bentley Continental. It's a vehicle that has between 500 and 700 horsepower. It's rated at getting between up to 14 miles per gallon city and up to 24 miles per gallon highway. I want to see that. I want to see a 700 horsepower vehicle that weighs 5,500 pounds. I'd like to see that get 24 miles to the gallon on the highway. I'd like to see it. I don't believe it. Unless it's in free fall from, let's say, Mount Everest. Other than that, I can't imagine it getting 24 miles per gallon gasoline engine. Even with computerized cylinders shut off and things like that, it sounds darn near impossible. So Arnie has bought himself a gas guzzler, no question about it. And he is fond of Hummers. He's had them for a long time. And they're not economy cars.
I was going to say something about the Hummers that when Rich mentioned the Bentley, they said that Arnold owned between 40 or 50 of them scattered around California, all different colors and models, the civilianized Humvee. So in other words, 40 or 50 Humvees alone, and God knows what else he owns, but when you look at what he gets per movie and what he's garnered, and he's a pretty shrewd type in the sense with his investments. In other words, he to him, let's just say he's an Austrian boy that made good, but if you look into his background, his connections and other things, I think he's tied in with the New World Order going back quite a ways.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. A lot of these people are related or have been pedophile slaves for years, and they got promoted. I've read crazy stuff. There's so much information out there, it's hard to tell what's real. But the reason why I mentioned those articles, like whether it be Arnie with the Bentley or Bernie Sanders, and, these so-called leftists, because Arnie is definitely not a true Republican at all. He's bought and paid for a globalist. What we need to do is really have practice what you preach laws, because we're not holding anybody's feet to the fire. Doesn't matter if they're a celebrity or an athlete or a big corporate oligarchy or a big government official. They're all bought and paid for to hold on to the narrative to make the people submissive. So how are we going to fight against this if we allow the hierarchy, which gets emboldened by the aristocracy, to sway public opinion, hold on to the narratives, themes, memes, and talking points? When they manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology, so we have to be submissive and break our will so we can't get empowered and basically make America better and make our lives better, what are we supposed to do when we allow the powers that be to reward mediocrity and they don't have the same accountability that they ask us to do? And this is why practice what you preach laws. I've been talking for years. George, you've heard me say practice what you preach laws many times. I give many different examples. The same people who are asking for the carbon footprint tax are flying around in private jets with ridiculous, $300,000 of private jets in 1 month, and they call themselves a socialist. We have to have practice what you preach laws, and I sure hope the Pentagon or the White House someday, somebody in there has the guts to say, this is a really good idea, let's do it. But because of the fact that it's very little left-right paradigm and very much more the aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs, the rule of law has been bought and paid for. And it's very difficult for the little guy to get restitution and to get a better life.
One thing, if I could, Vincent, remember you said you were approached years ago. You would come up with a number of designs between yourself and somebody else you were working with, and some politically connected individual approached you and said, look, we'll get you in the right market, we'll get you exposure, we'll get you this. The only thing is, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to buy into this. And basically, what he was saying in a veiled way was not so veiled way, was, in other words, you grace my palm with cash, and I can open doors for you, and not on the merits of your own design, which it was a worthwhile, worthy design, but in other words, without those connections, you wouldn't be allowed to rise to the heights and get that opportunity and that exposure.
Rich Sheben's with us. George in New Hampshire's with us. And George asked a question about something that happened to me back in the very late 70s. I started a company with two other gentlemen. And one of them happens to be involved with us at USA Prepares. And we built the very first satellite receiver that would receive television signals, HBO, Showtime, those kinds of signals for free over the air. And back then, if you wanted to connect your satellite receiver to your big 10 or 12-foot dish antenna outside, you would use a cable that was capable of transmitting that signal of 3.7 gigahertz to 4.2 gigahertz. And it was called Heliax. And it was about an inch in diameter. And it was rigid almost. You'd have to bend it with a pipe bender. Well, our chief engineer was a brilliant guy. You've heard him on the air with me. And he developed a dual conversion down converter, and he stepped down that 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz signal from the antenna down to 70 megahertz, which could be transmitted on an inexpensive cable. So Heliax was about $10 a foot for the cable. And we figured out a way to do it with a 10-cent per foot cable. So we went from $10 to 10 cents. And Al Gore knew about it. And he's the guy. Al Gore approached us and he wanted us to join his club called SPACE, Society for Private and Commercial Earth Stations. And all we had to do was pay money into this lobby group and we could be rock stars. And we didn't do it. And we did not become rock stars. But another guy did pay it and did become a rock star. And that is the predominant or the dominant force in satellite dish antennas that you see everywhere. They bought in and we didn't. So you're absolutely right.
Did they steal your design?
No. Well, that was another company that stole our design, broke into our rented space, copied our design, and came to the very next trade show with a Japanese model that was identical in every respect to our revolutionary, top-of-the-line, best you could get satellite receiver. We had the world's best. We wanted $1,499 for it, and they came out with a box that had LEDs that would light up, but no guts. They were not successful in copying our electronics, but they copied the box verbatim, and they wanted $700 for it. And they would take orders with delivery in 6 weeks. So there we were with ours was twice as expensive, but you could get it right then, right off the convention floor. You could buy it and take it home with you. You could plug it in, show you it works, teach you how to use it for $14.95. But then, nope. We were killed, absolutely killed by this company who stole our designs and was willing to offer to their customers at the same convention a copy of our receiver in 6 weeks. But they never made it work. They never made it work. So anybody who bought one never got a working receiver. But they killed us in the meantime with the promise that you could have it for half price. Yeah, that's the story of our company. And we had some of the best designs in the world. But it just goes to show you that it's really fierce out there. And dealing with Asian companies, my experience is they're ruthless. I was threatened My life was threatened. They told me that if I reduced the price on one of our receivers to the lowest price in the market, they'd kill me. And I took them seriously. And you know what? It's not a lot of fun. It's not a lot of fun when you have these nameless, faceless companies threatening to kill you.
Well, since I hear music, I'm going to probably say no, but as always, Vince, I want to thank you for allowing me to exercise my First Amendment rights. And it's always a pleasure to be on your show.